He was a force of nature, and I will miss him greatly. He was a man who gave America the full measure of his good and mighty heart until that heart itself just gave out.
When news broke that Senator Lindsey Graham had suddenly passed away, shockwaves ripped far beyond Capitol Hill, straight to the Oval Office. 4 years, Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham shared one of the most unpredictable and influential political partnerships in modern history. As the nation reeled, President Trump stepped forward to deliver a personal farewell to his closest Senate ally. How did a fierce rivalry transform into an unbreakable bond? And what does Graham's loss mean for America's future? The absolute truth from Trump. Inside Washington National Cathedral, the air felt heavy, almost surreal. World leaders, foreign diplomats, and longtime political rivals packed the pews to say goodbye to a man who had spent 3 decades steering power on Capitol Hill. But all eyes were on Donald Trump as he walked in. Sitting near foreign presidents who had flown across oceans for the service, Trump looked genuinely shaken. It was a final chapter in a wild, unpredictable friendship that nobody in political circles saw coming. When Trump walked up to the microphone to speak, the entire cathedral went completely silent. He didn't give a dry, stiff speech. Did he talk about top secret or foul play? Nope. Instead, Trump talked like a guy remembering a close buddy he'd been through the absolute trenches with. He called Lindsey Graham a giant of the Senate and a true original. Trump chuckled a bit as he told the audience that Lindsey was always the first person in the room to make you laugh, and usually the very last guy you'd ever want to pick a fight with. Trump brought everyone back to where it all started for Graham. Growing up in a tiny South Carolina town, raised in an apartment right above his parents' pool hall. Trump pointed out how those humble beginnings gave Lindsey his famous edge. His dad used to tell him that if you want to stay in business, you've got to be funny enough to keep people coming back, but tough enough to handle anyone who crosses you. Trump said that exact mentality defined Graham's entire career, whether he was cutting deals on the Senate floor or dealing with foreign dictators. As Donald Trump spoke, he didn't gloss over their famous fights. Because, it wasn't the most perfect start for both of them. He openly admitted they didn't see eye to eye on every foreign war or diplomatic deal. But Trump stressed that when the chips were down and the political heat was on, Graham's loyalty was unmatched. Trump reminisced about their endless late-night phone calls, their fiery golf course rivalries, and how Graham morphed from one of his harshest 2016 primary critics into his most trusted sounding board in Washington. Looking around the cathedral, you could see just how far Graham's reach went. Leaders like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu were sitting right there, listening to Trump speak. Donald Trump made sure to point that out, reminding everyone that very few politicians could command the exact same respect in a small-town South Carolina diner as they did in a foreign presidential palace. Trump closed his eulogy on a deeply personal note, backing Lindsey's sister, Darlene, to step up and carry on the family's legacy. People who worked with Graham knew he had a rare talent. He could rip an opponent to shreds on national TV during the day and then genuinely share a laugh over dinner with them that night. Donald Trump praised that rare quality, calling Graham an irreplaceable force who left a huge mark on the nation. As Trump stepped away from the podium, one big question hovered over the entire room. How did a man who spent decades moving the levers of global power suddenly disappear from the political chessboard overnight? A sudden exit in the nation's capital. The timeline of Saturday, July 11, 2026, started out like almost any other high-octane weekend in Lindsey Graham's relentless routine. He had just touched down back in Washington after a whirlwind diplomatic trip to Kiev, where he had met directly with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to hammer out details on a fresh round of Russian energy sanctions. To anyone who knew him, Graham seemed completely in his element, energized, focused, and preparing for a big Sunday morning appearance on national television to outline his next legislative moves. That evening, he jumped on a phone call with Donald Trump to debrief the president on his talks in Eastern Europe and talk strategy regarding ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Trump later recalled that while Graham sounded a little tired from the travel, he was in great spirits and sharp as ever. Nobody on either end of that call had any idea it would be their last conversation. Within hours of hanging up, the situation took a sudden, catastrophic turn. Paramedics received an urgent emergency call, dispatching them to Graham's Washington residence around 8:30 that evening. By late Saturday night, news broke that the four-term senator had passed away at 71 years old. Washington was thrown into absolute shock. Colleagues from both sides of the aisle, who had seen him roaming the Senate corridors just days prior, could barely process how fast it all happened. Initial reports from his office described the cause simply as a brief and sudden illness, which immediately ignited a frenzy of questions across the Capitol. Because Graham had spent his final 48 hours traveling abroad and dealing with volatile geopolitical conflicts, speculation on social media began to spiral out of control. Rumors alleging foreign involvement or sinister foul play quickly gained traction online. Recognizing how fast the narrative was running away, the medical examiner of the District of Columbia and local health authorities took swift action, releasing preliminary post-mortem findings to provide clear medical answers. The official medical determination revealed that Graham had suffered a massive aortic dissection, a sudden tear in the main artery carrying blood from the heart, brought on by underlying cardiovascular disease. Medical experts stepped forward to explain that aortic ruptures strike without warning, often mimicking sudden cardiac episodes and proving fatal within minutes. When asked about the rampant internet conspiracy theories surrounding the tragedy, Donald Trump did not mince words. In public remarks and media interviews, Trump firmly shut down the wild claims, stating that federal investigators were wasting their time looking into shadowy plots when medical professionals had already laid out the tragic facts. Trump noted that Graham had genetic heart health vulnerabilities, mentioning how Graham's father had passed away from a heart attack at a relatively young age, and expressed genuine sorrow that his close friend had not taken more time to slow down and care for his health amidst his demanding schedule. The sudden loss created an immediate political tremor across Capitol Hill. As flags were lowered to half-mast across the country on Trump's order, lawmakers realized that the Senate had lost its most vocal defense hawk and a primary bridge between competing factions. Graham's passing left critical foreign policy legislation hanging in the balance, while forcing state leaders in South Carolina to quickly navigate the process of fill-in appointments. But beyond the political logistics, Washington was left grappling with the sheer suddenness of losing one of its defining figures. To understand the magnitude of his loss, one must trace how an ardent critic transformed into the president's indispensable strategist. From bitter primary enemies to intimate confidants. Let's rewind to 2015, back when the two men absolutely despised each other. During the heated 2016 Republican presidential primaries, Graham was one of Trump's most outspoken political critics. He publicly called Trump a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot, and warned that choosing Trump as the nominee would destroy the Republican Party. Trump, never one to let an attack go unanswered, fired back with equal venom. At a campaign rally in South Carolina, Trump held up a piece of paper, read out Graham's personal cell phone number to a crowd of thousands, and urged everyone to give the senator a call. Within minutes, Graham's phone blew up with thousands of calls and text messages, forcing him to release a viral video showing himself destroying his phone with a golf club, a meat cleaver, and a blender. Back then, nobody in Washington would have predicted that these two men would ever share a meal, let alone become tight allies. But after Trump won the presidency in November 2016, something shifted dramatically. Graham made a deliberate, strategic decision. Following the pragmatism of his close mentor, Senator John McCain, Graham believed that if you want to influence the most powerful person on the planet, you have to be in the room with him. Graham famously reasoned that sitting on the sidelines and lobbing complaints wouldn't help his home state of South Carolina or shape national security. He decided to reach out, find common ground, and build a working relationship with the new commander-in-chief. What started as a practical working arrangement quickly transformed into one of the closest personal dynamics in modern politics. Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham began spending countless hours together, particularly on the golf course. The fairways of West Palm Beach and Sterling became their primary office for informal summits. Trump loved Graham's sharp wit, quick comebacks, and total political candor. Graham became one of the few people in Washington who could openly push back against Trump in private without getting permanently exiled from his inner circle. Before long, Graham was on Trump's speed dial. They spoke constantly, sometimes multiple times a day, discussing everything from judicial nominations to foreign military actions. Trump frequently joked during public rallies about how Lindsey went from burning his phone to calling him nonstop. When key political battles erupted over Supreme Court nominees or cabinet picks, Graham was always there on the Senate floor, acting as Trump's primary strategist and fiercest legislative shield. He seamlessly bridged the gap between the traditional Republican establishment and the MAGA movement, proving himself to be an indispensable bridge builder for the administration. Through golf games, late-night phone calls, and intense Senate fights, an unlikely brotherhood was forged out of sheer political necessity and genuine personal fondness. Donald Trump came to view Graham not just as a reliable vote, but as a loyal confidant who would stand by him when the political heat reached its absolute peak. Yet, long before he aligned with MAGA populism, Graham was defined by an entirely different brotherhood in the halls of international diplomacy: the foreign policy hawk and the three amigos. Long before Lindsey Graham became a central player in Donald Trump's world, his political identity was defined by a fiercely hawkish foreign policy and an iconic political trio on Capitol Hill. Alongside his closest mentor, the late Senator John McCain of Arizona and former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, Graham formed a legendary bipartisan alliance famously known across Washington as the Three Amigos. For nearly 2 decades, this trio traveled the globe together, visiting active war zones, meeting with foreign dictators, and relentlessly pushing for a strong, proactive American military footprint abroad. Where others saw messy geopolitical quicksand, Graham saw a moral imperative for American intervention. He firmly believed that the best way to keep freedom safe at home was to confront adversaries far beyond U.S. borders before they ever reached American shores. This unyielding defense philosophy made Graham a polarizing figure in modern American politics. To international allies like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Graham was an indispensable champion who consistently fought for military aid, strategic weapon deliveries, and crushing economic sanctions against hostile regimes. He was the kind of senator who wouldn't just vote for foreign aid from a comfortable office in Washington. He would regularly hop on military transport planes, land in active battlegrounds like Baghdad, Kabul, or Kiev, and meet directly with frontline commanders to assess the situation himself. Donald Trump often commented on Graham's relentless appetite for military defense, frequently joking during rallies and press briefings that Lindsey never met a war he didn't like. Yet, even while poking fun at his hawk instincts, Trump deeply respected Graham's unmatched depth of foreign affairs knowledge and his ability to work diplomats in every major foreign capital. However, Graham's traditional hawkish views often put him at sharp odds with the rising populist, America First wing of his own party. Isolationist Republicans and political commentators frequently criticized him as a relic of an older era, accusing him of prioritizing foreign wars over domestic issues like border security and the national economy. But Graham refused to back down or apologize for his stances. Instead, he worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between old-school Republican internationalism and Donald Trump's transaction-focused foreign policy. When Trump pushed for major peace deals in the Middle East, such as the historic Abraham Accords, Graham stepped in as a vital diplomatic conduit, utilizing his deep personal relationships with Middle Eastern leaders to help pull those historic agreements across the finish line. Graham's ability to remain an influential voice on defense, even as the political landscape shifted beneath his feet, demonstrated his incredible tactical instinct. Whether he was advising Trump on military strikes against terrorist commanders, pushing for tough intelligence sharing protocols, or defending military budgets against parliamentary spending cuts, Graham remained a formidable engine of American statecraft. His presence ensured that even during periods of deep political isolationism, the United States maintained a firm, muscular posture on the global stage. When the political stakes were highest on the Senate floor, Graham's fiery rhetoric could change the course of history. High-stakes battles, Kavanaugh, impeachments, and January 6th. When the political temperature in Washington hit absolute boiling point, Lindsey Graham was almost always the man standing in the eye of the storm. Nowhere was this more obvious than during the 2018 Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh. 4 days, the Senate Judiciary Committee room had been locked in a tense, bitter stalemate, with Democrats pressing allegations against Kavanaugh and Republicans treading cautiously. Then Graham took the floor, completely unscripted, and delivered a furious, viral speech that turned the tide of the entire fight. Shouting directly at his Democratic colleagues, he called the confirmation process an absolute sham and warned that anyone voting against Kavanaugh was endorsing political destruction. That single passionate outburst re-energized Senate conservatives, rallied the base, and cemented Graham as Donald Trump's premier legislative defender. That wasn't Graham's first rodeo when it came to high-stakes constitutional warfare. 2 decades earlier, back in 1998, a young Lindsey Graham had served as one of the key House prosecutors during the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton. He was a strict legal purist back then, arguing passionately that maintaining the integrity of the presidency meant holding leaders accountable to the rule of law. Fast forward 20 years, and Graham found himself in a completely different position, standing as the primary shield protecting Donald Trump through 2 separate Senate impeachment trials. Critics called it political hypocrisy, but Graham insisted it was about protecting the presidency from what he viewed as weaponized partisan attacks designed to overturn a legitimate election. Their relationship hit its most dramatic test on January 6, 2021. After the Capitol was breached and Congress reconvened late that night, an emotionally exhausted Graham took to the Senate floor and delivered a famous speech, declaring that while he had supported Donald Trump through thick and thin, all I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. Pundits immediately wrote off their partnership, declaring Graham's relationship with Trump officially dead. But those who knew Graham understood his deep pragmatic instincts. Within months, Graham was back at Mar-a-Lago, golfing with Trump and arguing that the future of the Republican Party was inextricably linked to Trump's leadership. He swallowed the public backlash, rebuilt the bridge, and remained at the center of Trump's inner circle, heading into the next presidential election cycle. Through confirmation battles, impeachment proceedings, and political insurrections, Graham proved time and again that he could absorb immense political punishment without losing his footing. Whether he was taking heat from liberal critics who accused him of selling out or from conservative hardliners who doubted his loyalty, Graham operated with a thick skin and an unwavering eye on legislative power. Donald Trump loved that fighter mentality, knowing that whenever a political battle turned into outright trench warfare, Lindsey Graham was the first guy who would jump in with both feet. Beyond public committee rooms lay a shadow diplomat pushing the boundaries of military doctrine behind closed doors. An influence behind the scenes.